I'm speaking with Rees, a local sculptor. Could you tell me, where were you born?
I was born in Reading, Berkshire in 1948.
And where did you study?
Well, of course, this was all in England at this time, because that's where I was brought up. I went to the West Sussex College of Arts and Crafts for 2 years part-time, first of all, which was in Horsham, in Sussex. And then from there I went to Worthing, and I was there 2 years full-time. And from there I graduated. It was a pre-diploma school. They prepared you for taking a diploma at another centre. And so I went to Bournemouth and Poole College of Art in Bournemouth, in Hampshire. And I was there for 3 years and received the certificates. You know, there were 3 certificates you got, diplomas.
So how old were you when you first became interested in art?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I guess I've always been interested in it. Ever since I was a child, I used to make things out of clay. I remember we had in the backyard of our house kind of a large sort of little hill of clay, you know, sort of a little mound of clay, and I used to sort of make a little city out of this. Sort of progresses out of making sandcastles, I guess, next step to it. And little plasticine figures about 3 inches high and so forth, and coloured plasticine, and sort of worked into it from there. But I guess you could say I started with any degree of seriousness probably about 13 or so.
When did you move to Windsor?
I moved to Windsor in August 1970.
What made you choose Windsor?
Well, a number of reasons. Basic reason was that I'd just been married, and my wife was from the States. I'd just come over from England. Actually, I'd met her 6 months before in England, and we corresponded, and then I came over to the States. I was going to stay in the States at first, but then I realized that I would be very draftable. You know? So I decided that would be ridiculous to stay in that situation. So Windsor seemed a fine place at that time. My wife could visit her parents, who were close by in the Detroit area, Rochester actually. And it's been very good to me, though. I'm very glad that I came here.
Locally, you've been famous for your sculpture. Have you ever worked in another medium?
Well, yes. You know, I've done a lot of drawings. That's essential for any artist, I think, to draw. It's very important. And try to continue drawing, obviously. Sometimes it's difficult because when you're doing something for a living, sometimes it's easy to eliminate the things that are not absolutely essential for doing it as fast as you can, I guess. But it's something that really you should do, you know, all the time. And I do try to do as many drawings as I can, because it keeps you alive visually, and it's another way of expressing yourself, and you can put down ideas very fast on paper too.
In sculpture, what type of materials do you like to use?
Well, many different materials. I should have mentioned that when I, along with drawing, I take photographs of my sculpture too, so, and of my sculpture at the end. So I guess, well, that's an art, of course, and it all relates. And I'm interested in the history of art, which is essential for a sculptor, because you can take in the information that you get from the history of art, and of course you can borrow from people of the past. And I follow in a certain tradition, so it's natural that I would be interested in the history of art. Any artist is conscious of the history of art, has to be, really, to be effective. I'm sorry, the question you had before, I regressed.
What type of materials?
Yeah.
do you like to work with?
Well, I like to work with clay, with terracotta. I like to work in marble, also in bronze and wood as well. I guess pretty much in that order. I like to work with marble and clay the best. Those two materials at this point in my development appeal to me the most, with perhaps bronze third and wood fourth, at this point in time anyway.
Why would you put them in that order?
I put them in that order probably because I enjoy with clay, for instance, I enjoy the flexibility of it, the effects you can get with it. You can get things with a tremendous amount of effects with it that you can't perhaps in other medium because it's so plastic, And when clay is cast into bronze, sometimes it loses something. It takes on something else too. Granted, it takes on the metal effect, but sometimes some of the subtleties I think are lost when it's cast. The color, I enjoy the terracotta color, which is sort of a brick color, although I would like to get into some other colored clays, different types of clay, perhaps a brown clay or something like this. That would be good too, but it's a good earthy material in the fullest sense of the word, terracotta, and it's what we're made of, right? So it's kind of appropriate.
Yeah.
I like marble for different reasons. You can get qualities. As clay aligns itself with the human form, so does marble, but in a different way. You see, people are actually translucent, and what I mean by that is, have you ever noticed, if you've seen a child perhaps, and you see a light behind somebody's head, electric light or something like this, and you'll notice that the light will pass through the child's ear or a person's ear. I just think of a child because a child perhaps doesn't usually have as much hair, and maybe their ears stick out perhaps a little more sometimes than an adult, and you can notice the light going through the ear. I'm sure you've noticed that, right? Now with perhaps also with the nose under certain situations you'll see the light coming through also with the fingers too. Now, marble has the translucent quality, and it's that's why it gives a flesh-like quality, because it has this roughly similar translucent quality to flesh. It's about the same degree, maybe slightly more, but it's pretty close, And it has also, you can polish it quite highly, and you can leave it rough. It has this sort of silky quality to it, and a veining in it, which is very beautiful, I think. That's why I enjoy it. Also, you can get numerous types of marble, which makes it interesting. Mostly, I guess most people think of white marble, but there are other medias. There are other, I should say, marbles besides white marble, which are very interesting to work into.
What's your favorite type of marble to work with?
Well, at this point in time, I enjoy the pink marble, Rose Aurora marble, which comes from Portugal. It's a very translucent marble. It has the advantage, its color, it's a salmon-y color, and it has a kind of a very faint green vein in it, and sometimes has a very darkish, purplish kind of veining, sometimes, occasionally. And occasionally it has white specks in it. It's a very alive medium. It can change very slightly from salmon-y pink to a slightly orangey pink back to a salmon, and then almost to a pale pink, And it's very beautiful. And of course, if you notice with people, that kind of coloration is pretty close, even to the veining, which is inclined to be slightly blue-green, And the Rose Aurora marble has that coloring, and so when you carve a piece in it can give a very realistic quality. and that's why I enjoy it very much. The only disadvantage with it is that it has large crystals, which make it more difficult to work than a finer grained marble, such as maybe Carrara or some of the American marbles from Alabama or Vermont or something. And that is a disadvantage. Sometimes it's a little harder to get as much detail as you would like for it to stand up and not crumble, because of the big crystals. I guess if you could get this Rora marble with very fine crystals, then I guess it would be, from my standpoint anyway, perhaps almost the ideal medium, in marble, that you could use. So, I like that marble very much, enjoy it. Also, the best Carrara marble is very beautiful, and although I haven't used it, I've used Carrara, but not the very best. I'd like to use it. I have a piece now, and I'm looking forward to using it eventually. I don't have it for any particular job as yet, but the thing about this marble, though, this is the very finest Carrara marble. It's called Michelangelo. It has kind of an eggshell color, sort of creamy eggshell color. And it's extremely translucent. Now, it's probably twice as translucent as most marble. It's quite waxy. If you shine a light, I guess you could get, if you were to shine a light bulb, you'd be able to see the light through, I'd say, probably 3 or 4 inches. You would be able to perceive from the other side the light, which is quite remarkable, really. You see? Yeah. So that's a beautiful marble too, and it's extremely fine grained, because that's, I guess you could say, the marble that's been used down the centuries, starting with Michelangelo, hence I guess the name of it. But so I've got a piece of that finally. There's one other type that I would like to get, and unfortunately it's almost, I guess you can use the word extinct, because it's almost been quarried out. And I understand from the shipper that I get my marble from that he says it's extremely difficult to get unless you go over to Italy yourself and stay there for a month or two and wait and get to know the foreman of the quarry and ask him to look out for a piece like that and let you come in once in a while and just check over and see what you like and then maybe take it home, sort of thing. That's about it, But this particular type of marble that I'm looking for, and as yet have not been able to find, is called yellow sienna marble. It's a marble, has very fine crystals. It's a little wild in places. What I mean by wild is it has rather treacherous areas where there's sort of browny markings in it, which are inclined to cleave, split away from one another. And but if you get a perfect block, it's just beautiful. It has that very nice creamy color, very almost yellowy in places. Not a bright yellow, but a sort of primrose yellow, I guess you could say. It's very beautiful. So I'm hoping one day that I can get a piece of this.
What type of subjects do you like to do?
Well, I like doing people. Yeah. People are very interesting to me. People are beautiful. When I say that, I mean that, okay, in the classic sense of the word, I suppose certain people, everyone, let's say, has a stereotype of what, let's say, a beautiful woman should look like, a beautiful child, a handsome man, or whatever. I don't necessarily mean it in that way, although I suppose naturally I have conception of what I guess would be a beauty too, but within people. But I think people are beautiful in their own way, different ages and children, ladies, men, whatever. They're beautiful in their own way, in their own type, and so forth, you see. And everyone has beauty in their own way. And I think if you can bring this out, this is the thing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Their character, you bring out their character, you bring out the positive and the negative. You know, that's part of a portrait sculptor or sculptor of people. This is it, you know, because this is their character, you know, and we all have positive and negative aspects to our character. You know, sure, we'd like to all have positive aspects, but this makes a probing portrait, a good portrait. If we look at master portraits that have been produced in the past, they've never been flattering, you know, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
They've always been very truthful and very analytical. For instance, you can think of, now I'm going into the realm of painting, it's true, think of Rembrandt.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you can even think of John Singer Sargent, who was, I guess, quote unquote, a painter of beautiful women, he was called, you know, and his paintings are, the only criticism perhaps is that maybe he has indulged in a little flattery at times, but basically they're very good paintings, very good portraits. But Rembrandt's painting is very probing and is very, I've seen a few that you can tell immediately the type of person, you can almost tell what the person's thinking about, what they're going to think about, what they have been thinking about, their attitude to sitting for the portrait. You know, it's almost endless.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, I think this is makes just an incredible work of art, something like this, you know, because people are intrigued by this forever, you know, almost. They look at this and as another human being, as it were, and they're interested to know what this person was thinking about. It's almost as if this person is still there with them somewhat through the medium of painting or sculpture. Bernini was able to do this. I'm very fond of Bernini's sculpture, the Italian sculptor of the 17th century, 17th century, lived a long time, almost the whole century actually, from 1598 to 1680. And his sculpture, particularly, I prefer perhaps the earlier work. I think his later work became too, in my opinion anyway, too, what's the expression? Almost became a vehicle for the church, and it became very, very emotional, almost too theatrical, almost too somewhat overdone. Maybe that's reasonable, in my opinion, you know,
Mm-hmm.
some of his later ones. But during the first 3/4 of his career, I'd say, he's produced some of the finest portrait sculpture and sculpture period that was ever produced, you know. There's one that stands out in my mind of course the church commissioned him to do a lot of work, so that's who he worked for, like Michelangelo too. But he did one of a cardinal, which is truly incredible, really, because the expression on this face, it's a round, pudgy face, and he looks like he's been frozen in the middle of a conversation, which is quite striking. And you feel, when you see a photograph of this, unfortunately I haven't seen the real thing, but you feel as if he could continue talking, you know. If you turned away, he would continue his discussion. It seemed quite an animated discussion, which is fairly typically Italian, you know. Bernini can sort of epitomize the Italian temperament in this sculpture, I think, quite well.
Mm-hmm.
His mother was Neapolitan, his father was Florentine, and he has this emotional punch in his work that is very easily you know, you can get the Italian temperament from it very, very easily, you know. You can see it. His sculpture of, there was another one he did that strikes me as being quite exceptional, of a Francis I d'Este, I think it was, in about 1658, something like this. He sculpted this. It's typical Baroque sculpture. Full wig, trouncing out all over, and the way he ended his bust is interesting. But he ended them in such a way that you were uncertain where the bust actually ended and where a huge swirling of drapery began. So it's quite remarkable. This bust is very animated. His sculptures of Pluto and Proserpina, I think. His sculpture of David he did. His sculpture of Apollo and Daphne, which I guess is quite famous. Apollo is chasing Daphne and she turns into a tree, which is a tremendous tour de force on marble, believe me, because he's got every leaf there. But the important thing is the quality of life and animation that he was able to capture in this. And he, of course, originated the Baroque tradition, which went throughout Europe and then eventually turned into Rococo, and then sort of died about the end of the 18th century, died out. Very remarkable, his work, like I say, particularly the early, which was a little stronger, a little less Rococo, I guess you could say. Michelangelo, too, of course, I hold great esteem. Now, his work is, I guess you could say, less emotional and stronger in some senses. And he has qualities which are, as a sculptor, perhaps slightly superior to Bernini. Some of, like I say, just at the end, though, he just got a little bit out of hand and just a little bit too theatrical. But Michelangelo's work is very strong and very conceived. It's hard to explain. It's carved out of a single block of stone. It's, it sounds cliched, been said many times before, it comes out of the block of stone. Usually, mostly the half-finished stuff definitely has that quality. It's bursting out of a block of stone. And that's reasonable. I have to say, though, I think that most of Michelangelo's work is unfinished because he didn't get a chance to finish it, contrary to maybe some people's feelings. But I think that was true. He had too much work and he was just unable physically to finish it all. It's as simple as that. But they're tremendous in as much that they show that a work of art should be complete within its stage right the way to finish, and also show the working methods of Michelangelo, which is important too, because that shows how his work has the vibrance at the end because of the way he conceived it, rather than as happened in later history in the 19th century, where a sculptor took a model in clay and just reproduced it full size, that is, full size model, life size, let's say, for instance, and then just got a technician to reproduce this completely in marble, and at best he would just finish it himself, which destroys the living quality of a stone sculpture, a marble sculpture, totally. And maybe that's why we have such an overreaction, in my opinion, in the abstract work of today, which has sort of totally gone away from this use of marble and so forth in a figurative way, because of its became too stifled, too I guess you could say, use the expression pretty, too almost commercialized the realism of the ancient Greek of the 4th and 5th centuries during the Victorian era, and so we're living still through this reaction, I think, which I frankly think is a gross overreaction. Mm-hmm. I've done some abstract work, and I enjoy it. Personally, I got to be very honest. in saying that I think that a lot of abstract work will not last the test of time. I think it's been called experimental art, and I think that's just exactly what it is. I think it's a reflection of the insecurity of our times. I think that it's trying to replace values which cannot be replaced. They are eternal values which man has, and they are, some may call me narrow for saying this, but I really believe it. There are certain values which are timeless and which are as solid as nature itself. I believe in God, and I believe these values are from God, and I believe to challenge them is to destroy civilization eventually. And I think this is reflected in the art. I think the neurosis of our times, because of pollution, because of atomic warfare, because of lack of maybe moral values, is reflected in a lot of the art, which has become very almost chaotic, almost a worship of the mechanical things, of things which are sometimes obviously there to shock people, which I suppose the artist has maybe good intentions, hopefully, in doing that. But quite often the general public is totally in the dark, and I think that who are we to say that as artists that we have a language which is superior, and that the general public should be educated to know about, should not be able to perceive and understand right off the bat. They should not be able to look at it and understand. They have to be educated and understand. Who are we to say this? Why such a tremendous change after this First World War, which to me is a turning point in the history of art? And I'm not saying for the good, personally. But on the other hand, there has been some abstract art which is truly worthwhile. And in my opinion, preface it with that because it is my opinion. Such people as Pevsner, Garbo, people like Brancusi. Let's see now. I think Giacometti too. I think Epstein too. Although I suppose Epstein would fall would be called a realist. But certainly I think of Noam Garbo and Pevsner as exponents of this. Their form of abstraction has meaning to it. It has a flowing line, a line that is appealing to anyone. This expression that you don't know what it is, so it doesn't mean anything to you. I don't think the general public doesn't really mean this. What they're trying to say is that some of the art clashes against all their observed concept in their instinct of what is beautiful that everyone has, what is logical, what is right. It sort of goes against it. I mean, if they look at something like Pevsner and Garbo, I've noticed a lot of them react in as much, well, I don't know what it is, but it does have a beautiful line, sort of thing, which shows that beauty has a universal quality, and form that is graceful has a universal quality which man can perceive with education or without. It's a visual thing, so why should he be educated to perceive what is beautiful? No one has to tell me that a tree is beautiful. or anyone who has any sensitivity at all doesn't have to be told that a flower is beautiful, or a bird is beautiful, or a blade of grass is beautiful. And so this is it, you know. And so I enjoy these. There's one piece in the art gallery that I really enjoy by a French sculptor. It's made of granite. It's out in the forecourt on the, I think it's the third story. They have a little forecourt there, a little court outside. Mm-hmm. I enjoy that one. It's a beautiful piece. It's obviously based on plant forms of something like that, I would imagine, or perhaps a shell. It reminds me very much of Pevsner, except Pevsner's work is largely made of wire. Now, some of the other abstract work, I think time will tell. It'll be interesting in maybe 10, 15, 20, 30, 50, 100 years' time, what men who are here will be saying about this kind of work and the philosophy that created it. It'll be very interesting.
So what, in your opinion, is art?
In my opinion, and this is my opinion, art at its very highest form, to me, is a demonstration, an expression, maybe is a better word, is an expression of what we see around us. It's a comment that I make about what I see. For instance, give an example. Okay, we take a child. And every child is beautiful unless they're deformed, you know. I mean, that is a tragic thing then. But every child is beautiful. You take this child, and there's tremendous beauty here. There's more beauty than anyone will ever notice in most cases. So what you do is, as a sculptor, this is what I try to do anyway, is I try to express that beauty in clay or stone and maybe exaggerate it slightly unconsciously, not in a conscious way, but unconsciously, emotionally, if you like, so that people will notice it through the sculpture. They will notice the beauty of creation, and I use that expression because I believe in that. That is all around them, to be noticed by everyone through the art. And so when they see this, they can see that hopefully I captured something of this child, some quality of this child, which is elusive, you know, and fleeting, not only their form but their expression, you know. And there it is for all time, as long as the piece of work exists anyway, for as many people as possible to notice and enjoy. And I feel that if I've done this, then this has enriched people's lives somewhat, and I think that's a good thing, you know. This is it, eh? And okay, someone buys it, sure, that keeps me alive. Let's face it, it's a business too. But I would like to think that the people who visit their house can enjoy it just as much as they do, and have every right to enjoy it just as much as they do. And that just about every client that I've done work for, of course it's up to them, they can refuse or not, according to their insurance or whatever, you know, to let me borrow it for exhibit. And if they do, then I think that's great too, because then lots of people can enjoy it, you see. Lots of people can see it and enjoy the personality of this person, enjoy it. And, you know, can freeze something elusive for all time for people to see. And hopefully that's a witness to the beauty that God has made. Okay?
What is the piece that you're most proud of?
Well, that's a difficult question. I'm glad you asked me, though. I guess it should be the last piece that I've done. because I do try to improve as I go along. I try to make, but in reality, of course, that's being a little idealistic to think that. There are several pieces that stand out in my mind that I think are very good for different reasons. But there are certainly more than one. To mention them, I don't know whether it would be worthwhile. Because,
yes.
okay, all right. I did one in marble of a young girl. It was 1974. It was of a young girl called Kelly Lawson, and I think I captured something with her that is universal. You know, let's face it, don't always capture to the same extent every time, you know. I mean, it's just, I liked Kelly. Maybe that helped. Kelly was a sweet little girl, I thought. A little 15-year-old, you know, but she had a very appealing personality. She was sweet. I guess that says it, you know. And she was smiling in the sculpture, and I think I captured a sort of the smile, the dreaminess behind the smile. Also, I did two in pink marble. One of a girl with a necklace that I was quite proud of, really, because I think I got the dreamy quality there too, and the feeling of her flesh, if you know what I mean. Like when I say flesh, I mean her shoulders, her arm, her hand, the combination of the pink marble and the way I carved it. You know, I think that came over well. The composition of the piece. I did another one of that was, her name was Susan Chick. I did another one of a Chris Zeder, which I was very proud of too, for different reasons. She's a Lebanese girl. She has you know, they have a little bit of, I say, it's the right word, mystique about them, a little bit. You know, it's hard to put your finger on them. They're quite. She, I thought, was quite a private person, and quite difficult to do. But I think I captured a kind of an inner glow with her, which is hard to put your finger on. It was a realism, but with that, interestingly enough, with hers, it's a little bit of a, I don't know if that's the right expression, but a spiritual quality, in as much as you get like a glow, a kind of feeling that she's pondering, something similar to the one of Kelly, kind of a pondering, a kind of dreamy quality, but a kind of a concentration. With Susan's, there was more of a calm, placid, but with Chris you feel more of an inward, not turmoil, that would be the wrong word, but inward excitement with an outward serenity, if you know what I mean, which it would tie in very close with Bernini, I guess, and would show considerable influence, which I'm not ashamed of. I wish no way to repeat what Bernini did. I believe only into continuing a tradition. And I think by working in marble and working realistically, highly realistically, in no way means that you're repeating the past. Something similar to the one of Kelly, kind of a pondering, a kind of dreamy quality, but a kind of a concentration. With Susan's, there was more of a calm, placid, but with Chris you feel more of an inward, not turmoil, that would be the wrong word, but inward excitement with an outward serenity, if you know what I mean, which it would tie in very close with Bernini, I guess, and would show considerable influence, which I'm not ashamed of. I wish no way to repeat what Bernini did. I believe only into continuing a tradition. And I think by working in marble and working realistically, highly realistically, in no way means that you're repeating the past. I have my own way of doing things. I have my own way of conceiving of busts, of composing them, of structuring them. The use of marble, even the fact of using pink marble, is an innovation. The way I cut my figures off is an innovation too. Why should a bust just be a head and shoulders? Why can't it be a half figure down to the hips? Why can't a bust be smiling? Why can't a half figure be doing something actively? Why not? A bust in art, as long as you bring it off, as long as it's convincing, as long as it doesn't look awkward, it doesn't look bizarre, it doesn't look what's the word now? It doesn't look like something's missing, and it becomes highly disturbing. Then if you can bring it off and convince people that this is it, this is not a representation of it, but this is it in its own right, you see. When I say obviously it's a representation, but it also becomes it, the thing itself, in its own right. That's how to explain. I did a man singing into a microphone, which I'm very pleased with. I enjoyed that. The conditions of the commission were to include, sounds strange, I know, a cup of coffee and a microphone, because the man was singing about he was singing about this cup of coffee, which symbolized a kind of a romantic theme. A person who gave him a cup of coffee, a young lady who gave him a cup of coffee in his culture would mean there was romantic overtones, you see. Okay? That was the idea behind it. But I made the bust so that these things could be removed or put in. I did that for the client because, okay, the microphone, I think as an artist sometimes you're doing things for a living, and so that's fine, that the condition of the commission is that, but I do it for posterity, and I did it in that way that it could be removed, because he can be dancing and singing without that, you see. And it goes down to the hips, so he has his sort of hand like this, and the other one sort of like this, you see.
One at shoulder height, one at hip height.
Yes, see, and there's a definite feeling that he's dancing, even if he doesn't have these things in his hands, you see. And, well, I guess to be very honest, I hope that that's the way it will survive for posterity, but and I feel no shame in as much that I did it the other way, that it can be displayed either way, because that's my solution, and I feel that I'm making the best of both worlds, and it succeeds aesthetically both ways. Perhaps best without.
Chris Rees, thank you. This is the end of tape 1.